I'm calling the February 7th meeting of the Advisory Committee to order. We have lots going on tonight. I appreciate the folks who pulled their heels in the hallway while we wrapped up another meeting. I'd also like to thank Harbor Media, who is here to tape us tonight. We are not broadcasting live. That's happening with the selectmen, but this will be available for viewing in a day or so. With that, I will say that the advisory committee sets aside time at the start of each meeting for comments from the public on items that are not on the agenda. Since I see some faces I don't recognize, does anyone wish to speak to something that's not on the agenda? Okay, everybody's here to talk about all the things we wanted to talk about anyway. I'm Donna Smallwood, I'm chair of the advisory committee, and what we're going to consider first is a hearing on what we're, please excuse me, I have a cough, on what we're calling Article Z at the moment, the Foster School article to amend the feasibility study vote. The way we're going to do this hearing is that the AdCom liaison to the question is going to kind of give us an overview of what the question is about and some context. I think we'll, if there's a designee or so from the school committee wants to come up and sit at the table and help us answer questions, we're happy to have you help us understand the context of this. We'll then take questions from advisory committee members, and I'll then open the floor to questions from members of the public who here would like to ask a question or make a comment. After that hearing, and we are not going to vote that article tonight, we are going to vote that article at a later time, likely the week after school vacation, determined, which we will publicize. We will then move on to the other articles that are coming to us from our friends on the school committee, and we do anticipate voting the other three tonight. Sound like a game plan for everybody? Okay. George, would you please introduce us to the question before us?
I would be happy to do that, Donna. Good evening to all of you. So, Article Z, as Donna has mentioned, is submitted by the school committee and seeks to amend the original 2017 town meeting approved article, which established a fund to perform a feasibility study regarding upgrading or replacing Foster School. The original article restricted the use of the funds to acceptance by the town into the MSBA school building program. The MSBA program allows municipalities to receive reimbursement for 31% of expenditures related to school building projects. Some of the background information about Foster. Foster was built in 1951 and had updates in 1957, 1974, and 2008. It currently serves 489 students in a K-5 environment. In 2005, the school committee master plan identified Foster as a school requiring major upgrades and or replacement in the future. A number of years went by, and as you may recall, there were some economic difficulties shortly after the 2005 studies. And so in 2017, the school committee came forward, applied to the MSBA for acceptance, and came to town meeting with two articles. The first article was to establish a school building committee. That school building committee would be responsible for conducting the feasibility study, just mentioned, which approved $750,000 in funding to conduct that study. Unfortunately, the town was not accepted into the 2017 MSBA program and resubmitted its application in 2018. The MSBA program is a wonderful program in that it reimburses municipalities for 31% of their expenses. And because of this, it has become very popular. In 2018, there were 70 submissions to the MSBA program. Of that 70, 20 were returned to the initiators for additional work. Of the remaining 50, a number were dropped out by the MSBA for reasons we do not know, and so they ended up working with a number of 28. Hingham was one of the 28. Of the 28, 12 were accepted into the program. So Hingham now has applied twice and has been rejected twice. The MSBA program is one where each municipality or the program starts with a clean slate every year. So the fact that Hingham has applied twice and has been rejected does not give us a leg up for a third try. We start at the beginning just like every other school, every other town. The school committee has decided that they would file a third application. But there is also concern because of the condition of Foster School. Foster, thanks to the, I will say, outstanding work of the school administration, is a school in good shape. It is an old school. It requires a fair amount of maintenance, but the administration has made it a safe environment for kids to go to school and to learn. There are inadequacies, certainly, in terms of the class sizes, classroom sizes. There are inadequacies as far as the windows go, and perhaps two of the major inadequacies are that the electrical system is the original 1951 installed one. So the circuit breaker panel is fairly old at this point. It does continue to work, but obviously at that age it's susceptible to some kind of a catastrophic failure. The heating system is apparently a 1970s era system, and again is old. They do work, and the school administration does have a contingency plan, which is contained in an article that we will discuss later on this evening, that establishes a $350,000 extraordinary maintenance sum of money. And a couple of things that the administration would plan to do with this money is to install some type of a quick connect electrical connection, and I'm probably not doing it justice, John, but this would allow the administration to basically wheel in a generator that would sit outside the building in the event of an electrical failure, and it could be connected via this quick connect to the inside wiring and provide electricity to the school. It's obviously a Band-Aid, but it is something that would work. Another option identified by the administration is to do something similar with the heating system, so that if the boiler and the boilers died and we're going to be down for an extended period of time, a temporary boiler could be brought in, connected, and heat would be provided to the school. These are certainly not ideal options. They're certainly not long-term options, but they are short-term steps that could be taken to maintain Foster for some period of time. The main issue, though, is that after applying twice and not being accepted, how many times do we go down that road? There's no guarantee we'd be accepted a third time. But the school committee has decided to file a third application with the MSBA. And that application will be submitted as of April 12th, I believe is the deadline. The town will hear in December of this year whether it has been accepted into the program or not. However, because of the condition of Foster, the lead time, even if we're accepted, to when a new school could be built and the condition of foster. The school committee would like to go forward, and that's what Article Z is, with an amendment to the original 2017 article, which takes away the prohibition of using the $750,000 based upon acceptance into the MSBA program. So essentially, whether we're accepted or we're not accepted into the program, $750,000 would be spent on a feasibility study. The study would take anywhere from 6 to 8, maybe 10 months to complete, at which point the school committee would envision coming before perhaps a special town committee meeting to request funding to go ahead and build a new school or to remodernize the existing one. If the town is accepted into the MSBA program on this time, then everything is fine. We qualify for 31% reimbursement. If we're not accepted into the program, then this amendment would allow the school building committee to go forward and do a feasibility study. Now, there are a couple of issues with going down this path. The first is that the MSBA is a process-driven organization. They have the rule book, they have the baseball, they have the bat, they have the gloves, and they have the umpires. So you have to follow their program, and it's a step-by-step program. It is certainly my understanding that if we were to proceed and do a feasibility study without being accepted into the MSBA program, we would first of all have some difficulty finding a qualified vendor to do this study. And the reason for that is the MSBA has a list of preferred vendors that you use. And if a vendor or if a town contracts with one of these vendors to do a feasibility study, then that vendor is prohibited from applying for the main school building project. So there's reduced incentive for these vendors to do a $750,000 feasibility study for us at the expense of not being able to apply for what's an estimated $40 million plus building project. So that's a major issue with proceeding outside of the MSBA program. So another question that can be brought up is, so why don't we just continue and apply for acceptance into the program a fourth time? And we could do that. And maybe we get accepted on the fourth time. Well, that would be good because now we're eligible for 31% reimbursement. However, again, according to the rules of the MSBA, the initial study, feasibility study that we have just finished cannot be used, and the $750,000 that we spent on that study cannot be reimbursed. However, the offset to that is that we would now be eligible for some 12 to 13 or so million dollars in reimbursable costs. So we would be giving away $750,000, but we would become eligible for more money. Now, there are timing issues associated with applying a fourth time because that now adds another year to the whole process. And the condition of the school is certainly not going to improve over that year. It can be maintained, but it's still not going to improve. So that's my summation of the program. I know there are people from the school committee and from the building committee. If there's something they would like to add, I would be happy to have them step forward or take questions from my colleagues here.
School folks want to add anything?
I would say the only thing that I would add is, so George mentioned that the
John Ferris,
John.
our
Sorry.
Business Director. Slide that, yeah, give George a share. Thank you. I'm sorry we're so tight tonight. There's so much going on in town hall, we couldn't get through the room.
John Ferris, the business director for the school department. So I just wanted to clarify that, so the MSBA reimbursement is a minimum of 31%. That doesn't mean that it would be 31%.
What's the range, John? 31 to what?
If they go, I'm not sure what the high range is, but I know for the middle school, we ended up at around 43%. But that was a model school, and there were special incentives for it. So, but you know, it's just not a set 31. That would be the minimum. It could potentially be more. So everybody should be aware of that. Otherwise, I think George, you did a good job describing the project and what the issues are. Was there anything else you missed? I think that was the only clarification. Yeah, I'd be happy to answer anything too.
Okay. Questions from our colleagues on AdCom?
So in the ultimate recommendation, you would foresee that there'd be a trigger date of either in or out of the MSBA before any of the money is spent? Yes, no? Does it make sense?
The third application you vote?
Yes.
So December
So
2015.
if the town meeting votes to remove the prohibition, something is going to say that the 750 becomes available only upon the MSBA not accepting
That's what it
the
says.
third application.
Right, yes, it would be upon, you know, a denial by the MSBA in their 2019 SOI or December 2019, or, you know, whatever's earlier. Sorry, I should have grabbed my language before I came up. But it does say it in there, whichever comes
We have the
earlier.
warrant article, we don't have a draft recommendation. Right? That's the only reason why I asked the question.
Yeah.
I think, maybe to your point, maybe beyond your point, I think what the town needs to be aware of is that this article is approved, if we're not accepted in the program, then quite possibly they're looking at a future town meeting where school committee is coming forward saying, the cost of this new school is $40 million, and there is no reimbursable funds available from the state for it.
Does this proposal get back to MSBA and send them a message that on our third, they don't really have to take our third application seriously?
Could I speak to that for a second? So the language that's proposed, though, say the MSBA has very prescribed language. Okay, so what's not included in the MSBA's prescribed language is any contingency as you read. So, you know, that contingency is something that we crafted back in 2017, because what happens in the eligibility period is what the MSBA is saying is you're invited into the eligibility period. In that time, we want you to develop a school building committee, and we want you to secure your votes. Okay, so we've for your money for the feasibility study to be before you can be entered into feasibility period. Okay, so that is a comment that's for our benefit.
No, my question is, so if we go ahead with this, we say that we're going to take a third shot, but we're ready to go ahead if we get turned down, which we're going to go and build it, or we're going to propose and build it ourselves. Does that send them a message that we don't need to use our state money on this project because the town's...
Right. I mean, I don't know that would send a message, because that simply says we'll make the money available to the building committee. Right? It doesn't say that we're going to go it alone or build ourselves. So, I mean, there's more to it.
So, to me, the trickiest part feels like, and George, if I understand it, Ray, you presented at the school committee meeting, that if we are not accepted a third time and decide to go it alone, but leave the possibility open that one of the qualified firms that we've worked with in the past may not want to work with us on this building, and it will put us in a difficult situation.
I heard the same thing. That's what I heard, but it was at the same meeting.
Additional questions, Libby?
And Victor, I actually had the same question, and I think they mentioned a little bit on the second page in George's comments. about, I think it's the paragraph that starts with however, if the town is not approved, so it just talks about the impact, the decision would be about how this action, so just to point that out.
Do we have any information, we know from the MSBA, you know, any information about of the schools that were chosen this year? Were they on their first ask, their second ask, their third ask, their fourth ask? We have, I know the MSBA is kind of a black box that we can't get inside of, but do we have any sense of what the lay of the land is? Do we know from towns that are going it on their own, how many times they applied?
Yeah, I don't have that information. I don't know if anybody
Is that
else
information
has got that
we can
information.
get, since
Well,
we're not making a decision tonight?
I mean, we can call the MSBA and ask what you know, when we got denied, we did call the MSBA, and, you know, what we know is that the fewer projects that they accepted are simply because the projects are getting larger,
They're getting
you know.
bigger, right.
You know, I'm not sure of their willingness to say, okay, hey, this one, how many times did they apply before they got accepted, or to engage with us in that fashion?
But we could make a phone call, and
we-
if they
we
slam the
could.
phone down, we could say thank you.
Right.
And related to that, do we know why we were not accepted?
We were not, our application was fine. We were not accepted because they didn't have the funding for all the projects they would have liked to done.
Right, but
We did make the
why
review.
we didn't make the last cut to the 12 or whatever.
Right, well, it's just because they determined that the other projects were more needy in the MSBA fashion.
The projects, do I understand the projects are getting bigger and more expensive?
Yes.
And so they can accommodate fewer. Additional questions, Julie?
This may have been sort of already asked by Donna, but is there anyone out there, any towns who have tried for a fourth time and got it on the fourth try?
I'm seeing yes.
Yes.
Watertown.
Watertown?
Watertown.
And do you know?
One we know.
One that we
One you
know. is
know,
Watertown.
Additional?
I have a timing question, or Ray. If the money can't start to be spent until next December when you have a decision, then you've got to issue an RFP and get a vendor in to do a feasibility study. But you could go to town meeting next year, 4 months down the road. Does the 4 months difference make a significant impact on planning for a new school or a remodeled school?
I think that's a school committee decision on that one. You know, I mean, when you say 4 months, you know, if it's 4 months whenever you start the process, there's going to be a timeline there. So, you know, you'd have to spend probably 6 weeks procuring the OPM. And, you know, I mean, I think that one of the keys would be to have a plan. This is a plan, so.
If we don't know, and I don't think we do know, whether having a public vote that in fact says we're gonna go ahead if we don't, on our own, if we don't get the third one. If we don't know how that impacts our chances with MSBA, whether if MSBA is looking at, you know, I got this many applications and this much available money, and Hingham has said they'll go on their own, so it's easier to slide us away. Is the 4-month delay, is that worth that risk?
I can't really speak to the human element, Donna. I don't know what these people are going to think. I don't know if they're going to research us, if they're going to look, oh, well, let's take a look and see what Hingham's doing. You know, I just can't speak to the human element. You know, I can't speak to that because I don't know. You know, I mean, if you know, different people have different levels of, you know, engagement and stuff, right? If it's me, I try to be balanced all the way, and I said, I don't care how they act. If I'm doing a process, I want to do the process, and I want to be true to everybody, but I don't know.
Yep.
I just can't answer it. I wish I could,
So-
but I can't.
So what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out the risk-reward balance between moving on a project that clearly needs to be moved on the one hand,
Right.
but protecting our best chance at the sun shining on us the day that MSBA looks at us. So we're just trying to figure that out.
Right, if we perceive a risk,
Yep.
and, I guess I don't want to be dumb, but I would like to think that I don't perceive a risk. Okay, I would like to perceive that the process will be true and it will be equal and fair to everybody. That's what I would hope for.
I had a similar question to Bob on the timing, so I just wondered for the comments, when would, it does say here that there would be, if you didn't get accepted in December, that you would proceed with the study with the intention of coming before a special town meeting. So that's saying if you would conceivably before next town meeting in 2020? So is that what we're saying here? Is that the timing? Because I think I would just be careful about the intention of rather than they may.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think the special town meeting would not be before town meeting 2020.
Okay.
But it would be at some
Gotcha,
point
okay.
afterward, because the feasibility study would take something between 6 and 10 months.
And I think the may should be literally as may.
May.
Not will or anything like that, it's may.
Yep.
I mean,
Could.
Yep. We need to be clear. The word may is intentional may. Not saying will, do, it's may, right? There's a difference. I just want to make sure everybody, interprets that difference, okay?
So you like May, because I didn't see it in here, so that's a.
May is
Well,
intentional.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Victor?
George was mentioning, the Band-Aid solutions, the stopgap and whatever. I guess two related questions. How long do you feel comfortable that the school can go on with stopgap measures if the money's not available, for the project? And how long, once the decision is if we're accepted into MSBA or if we're going it alone, how long is it before we actually have the project completed?
Bear with me for 1 second as I recall the question. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't believe that there's a risk of this building going down and being unviable for any period of time in the foreseeable future. Okay? I don't believe it for a second. I think it has just as much risk of disappearing in its presence as any other building may. It has to be something major, something catastrophic. As George mentioned, we are planning to, we have a plan, and that the extraordinary maintenance article is one of those to put that quick connect switch in. That was accurate, the quick connect. Okay, the difference between that quick connect and not having the quick connect is 3 weeks of not having school. The quick connect can drop that down to a day or two. I think it's a good investment, okay? The other thing is the circuit panel is 1951, and the circuit breakers do have to be rebuilt. In my planning with that extraordinary maintenance, that I would do a major rebuild of that switch, okay? So that we could rebuild those circuit breakers. You can't buy them, but you gotta rebuild them, so you can go through that effort of rebuilding them. All right, now, so when you look at the risks of the building, you're looking at, there's a risk of, electrical going out or boiler going out or a water problem, right? Water main breaks, you fix the water main, okay? And there'll be a cost, but the building can still be operational and viable, right? You lose a couple days or something, it can still do that. It shares the same risk if the building were to blow up or catch fire or something like that. Any one of my buildings, that could happen to. But I don't expect the building to sort of not be viable for the foreseeable future. And once we get into the project, I do believe that, we got about a year in building, and then if everything goes right, we can probably do it within 3 years or 4 years, right? You take it all depends if you had the money, right? I mean, if you don't have the money, you add another year onto it, okay? But if you have the money and you go, I think you can get it designed in 1 year, get it out to bid, and then within a couple of years, you can get it built and then operational. So you're really looking for, a total of about 3 years of elapsed time after you get the money, at a minimum, to get into the building, where, now you don't have to worry about the old stuff, right? Because you have a new building.
Additional questions, Dave?
John, let's assume that we pass this article, we don't succeed in a third try. So the school building committee ends up with their money in December. Based on what I heard at a prior meeting that Evan referenced, there's concern from vendors who do a feasibility study about whether they can be participating if we're going to in fact go for the fourth try. Are we going to be in a position then, or is the building committee going to be in a position then in December to represent to vendors considering the feasibility study that we will or will not be applying? And in other words, how do we handle that? And do we if there's a vendor that we want who's reticent because they're concerned we're going for a fourth try, are we going to say we won't? Or are we going to, in other words, don't we have to decide if we're going for a fourth now in that context?
Ray got the information on the vendor. Would you care to answer the question about the vendor stuff?
Sure.
Or, yeah. Would you mind if Ray answered that, the vice chair for the school building committee? School building committee? Yeah.
You want me to?
You want to sit
Just
here?
pull up, switch to the Good evening. Ray Estes, 92 Fort Hill Street, Vice Chair of the School Building Committee. And by the way, the Chair, Linda Hill, is traveling. I did connect with her today, and she knew that I would be here this evening. School Building Committee is actually meeting next Wednesday. So, Dave, it's a really good question. The answer is it's a policy decision for the school committee, but I would say it would be difficult for the decision not to be made, at least at that time, if not sooner, about reapplying again for perhaps a fourth time. Following the selectmen's meeting Tuesday evening, there were a number of questions that were posed, and I did some additional research and talked to a number of folks and got answers to many of them, if not all of them. And just speaking personally, this has not been discussed among the school building committee at all. We haven't met for a couple of months. I think we would have a difficult time getting the appropriate designer on board. Speaking to a couple of them recently, and one in particular with whom we've worked a number of times in the past, there was a situation in another town that kind of had a chilling effect on designers working with a town independently while they were still seeking to apply for MSBA funding. That situation specifically was a North Shore town, and they started working on feasibility because they really couldn't wait, but they held out hope for that reimbursement, obviously, and wanting to partner with the state. And the designer they selected worked with them. The designer did bid on the larger project when the invitation from the state came, and that designer was selected and did represent them on the larger building project. But that wouldn't happen again. The MSBA, my understanding is that there was clear direction following that to OPMs and architectural firms, designers, that that would be a concern. And the likelihood is they would not be able to bid on the larger project. And of course, the firms want the larger project. So that's certainly a concern.
Can I ask the question kind of flip it on its head then? How do you weigh the potential benefit of a fourth application versus the cost of not getting your first choice in a feasibility study?
I actually think, based on, and you ask, well, does the MSBA tell you? Can you ask the MSBA? The MSBA is not going to tell us anything. All you can get is kind of anecdotal evidence from folks who were involved in the process on other projects. And I've spoken to some folks who do hundreds of projects with the MSBA. And the message that I was getting was, you should remain optimistic about a third submission and even a fourth submission if you get turned down the third time. Watertown submitted a fourth time and they were chosen. And part of the reason why, I think Victor asked, do we know why we were turned down the first or second time? We don't really know, but we can kind of glean some information, particularly about the second no. I think Donna mentioned that they're larger, more costly projects now. In particular, this year it was 70 went to 26, and then 12 were chosen. And that's a much lower number than typical. In the past, it's been in the 20s. In 2017, it was 15 that were chosen out of 84 original applications, and then 2018, 70 to 26, and then 12. We were one of the 26, and then didn't make the cut for 12. My understanding was in 2017, we were the 16th district, and they chose 15. Didn't get that specific information about 2018, but what I did learn was the amount of funding that they had available was greatly reduced because they had a number of significant large high school projects that they were trying to wind off, and Somerville, Lowell, Waltham, and Fall River in particular, and that kind of constricted the amount of funding that was available for the 2018 round, and that's why it was much smaller and fewer districts were invited. You could say, well, more and more projects are becoming more expensive. Maybe it's more high schools versus more elementary schools. I think, one of the criteria that the MSBA weighs and they take into account is they like to have a mix of applicants. So they don't just take all high schools or all elementary schools or all middle schools. I think it depends on need, urgency of need, and then how much money they have available. And sometimes more costly projects will reduce the number, but not necessarily edge out elementary or middle school, because the high schools tend to be more expensive because they're larger. So that's a little bit of information that I think is somewhat helpful.
Michelle, do you want to chime in here at all? Are you all right?
Sure. Thank you. Michelle Ayer, School Committee Chair. So I think part of the, just to understand where the school committee was coming from on this, the foster school has been on the town's master plan for rebuild since 2005. That's nearly 15 years ago. In 2008, the town appropriated $3.5 million, or $7 million to split between foster school and Plymouth River School to address and put some stopgap measures in to keep the school viable for another 10 years. Those 10 years have come and gone. And now we're at the point that we have already been turned down from the MSBA twice, and while no one in the community wants to leave taxpayer money on the table, right? It's our money, we pay taxes, that's our money that could come back to the community. I think our thought was that we don't see that there's a path forward except every year being told, well, just wait for the MSBA funding. And we've already been turned down twice. We're willing to go a third time, but for us, it feels that if we don't get it the third time, that the path forward, we may just have to admit to ourselves that the town is going to have to bear the cost and cover the expenses. We've put this project off for 15 years. The stopgap measures that the school department, the maintenance team, the custodians, the staff, the parents have been overwhelming and have kept the school safe and clean, but it's not conducive to 21st century learning, and more importantly, it's not equitable. I mean, that's the bottom line, that the school is not equitable when we compare it to the other schools in town. And that is not fair to the students or to the parents or to the staff at that school. And so while the school committee is very cognizant of the financial limitations of the town, and we understand the needs of many, many departments in the town, we just feel that we have gotten to a point that we are willing to wait a third time and apply for a third time, but if we don't get it the third time, we just have to do our own feasibility study and take that as a path forward.
Michelle, let me ask the question I asked earlier one more time.
Sure.
Help me understand the thinking. I'm still struggling with, if we act on it this year, what it saves us is 4 months. If we postpone the question of of going it alone on Foster School until town meeting 2020, we've lost 4 months because we've heard from, if we don't get the answer we want from the MSBA, our hearts are broken and we lose 4 months. But it's 4 months. And, you know, in 2020, if the school committee then comes to the community and says, okay, you know, 3 times at bat and we're done, and let's go forward, we've lost the 3 months, but we haven't, I really, you can tell, I'm concerned about our chances being somehow impacted by making this decision now and then going the third time, that somehow that will impact. We don't know, we hope it doesn't, but we're not sure. And also the issue, you know, it takes away the issue of the vendor and getting the vendor that you want. So help me understand the calculation that the school committee made.
Sure. So I think Ray has some things to add. But first, I would just say, so our thought process on that was that if we find out on December 1st of 2019 that we did not get accepted into the MSBA, we could if this warrant article was approved, we would have the immediate funds to go out and do our own feasibility study, which we could start immediately, and then in the April town meeting of 2020, we'd be able to come to the town with the feasibility study complete, or having a very good idea of what the project was, what the scope of the project was, and could go to that town meeting to ask for funding to approve the project.
Do you think you can do
So
that quickly?
the feasibility studies can be
So
a few months.
If you recall with the middle school,
Just
for
said
example.
6 to 10 months, so I don't
Yeah,
know.
so that's not really accurate.
Right, so that was, yes, so that wasn't accurate.
So if you recall the middle school, we went to town meeting in April of 2011 for feasibility money, $600,000, I believe it was. And then we had a special town meeting in October of 2011 for the full funding for the project. And so that was a 6-month period during which, and granted, the MSBA program has evolved a little bit and added a module or a step, eligibility before feasibility, so there's an additional step, an additional time period now. But what you need to do during feasibility certainly could be done in a 6-month period, if not less, particularly if you've already done some of the things that might be included in a feasibility study, like an enrollment study, which was just done, or site investigative work, including a geotechnical study, which has been done.
Right.
So those things, if you think about going independently, the things that we have done over the last year and a half in anticipation or preparation will certainly be useful to us and could shorten the time frame. I think they also still would be informative and perhaps used if we were to partner with the MSBA and be invited, even though there would be additional work necessary. The MSBA always does its own enrollment study anyway. We had done one in 2011 with the middle school, 2010, before being invited. They still did their own because that's just the way they operate. But certainly what we've done would be informative and used, so I don't know that it would be a waste of money, even if it weren't reimbursed. There's no guarantee that it wouldn't be reimbursed. There's no hard and fast rule. You can't find it on the website. No one will tell you that. The phrase that's always used, particularly by designers, is any money you spend prior to an MSBA invitation is at risk. So there's no guarantee of reimbursement. There's a possibility, but not a strong likelihood.
I've been talking. Andy, you've been waiting.
The information we have is that recently Newton, Winchester, Brookline, and Needham for sure, and we thought Watertown, but those four at least began the process of building and paying for schools without assistance. And Ray just told us that Somerville, Lowell, Waltham, and Fall River were awarded grants. And so when you say the MSBA decides on need, are they looking at the financial resources of the town in terms of determining the need? Because it would seem if you compare those two that, you know, obviously the four that are going forward on their own are wealthier towns than the four that are receiving the state's assistance.
Yeah. So the short answer to that is no. I don't think that that's one of the considerations that they look at. So the MSBA's approach, it's kind of both objective and subjective. First, they look at your submission and your need and the urgency of that need. Yep.
And when you say your need, you mean the need for the new school, not your ability to pay.
Correct. Yeah, what the basis of your submission is, you know, whether it's physical plant attributes or it's overcrowding or whatever it is. The ability to pay comes into play during the time that you have to secure your vote, because obviously the vote would have a money result attached to it, and there are plenty of towns historically who have not been able to secure their vote and have been kicked out or deferred. But the other aspect is subjective, because once they review your application for its need and urgency of need, then they look at the pool of applicants and you're up against them. It's kind of like college, right? You're competing against your fellow students, and whoever does the best job gets the A, and it goes down from there. So you're, you know, I don't think it has anything to do with, for instance, Watertown was accepted for its high school into the program on the 4th try. But it also pursued a number of, and is pursuing now, a number of projects independently at the same time. A town like Watertown you wouldn't think is necessarily a wealthy town, but actually they're funding those independent projects through capital, not a debt exclusion, where we would fund it through a debt exclusion. And we're one of 12 or 13 AAA bond rated towns. Watertown is not one of those. So I don't know that aspect comes into play necessarily.
Liza?
Can I add one thing? Those towns also, the MSBA only allows you to have one project in their one of these core projects in the pipeline at a time. And so like with Watertown, they had their high school in there, they also had the need for another project. These towns had need in their master plans for multiple projects. And so
Watertown was funded on one of its schools, and then went ahead and
similar to these other
is going to go ahead and build the other school on its own.
They had an MSBA project in the pipeline. They had the need to get other things done, so they self-funded the other projects. Our projects are just that's why we did East School. At the time when we did East School, we wanted to do East School and the middle school. But under MSBA guidelines, we can only pick one project. So we started with East School. When that one was completed, then we also applied for middle school.
Okay, who's over here?
I have one, just
Yep.
a quick one. Feels to me like we're trying to plan for something that we can't control. But what I did hear from you, Michelle, is that the school committee is fairly resolved that the third try is the third try, and then we ask the town to move forward. So we wouldn't necessarily be setting up this conundrum where we may not get the architect or builder that we want because we may be continuing for a fourth time.
Yes, I mean, we have to sort of formalize that amongst ourselves. And I mean, of course, we want to try to get any funding sources that we can get to offset the cost to the taxpayer. But we do feel strongly as well, I think, as the administration, that the time has come to do something with this building. It can't wait it can't wait until 2022, right? A fourth time would be a very long time to wait to do something with this school. And the more time that we wait, the more we risk something bigger happening to the building that would make it uninhabitable for some period of time. And the costs just keep going up every year that we don't act on this. So.
So mentioning, we mentioned East in the middle school, and they were built over the past 10 years with MSBA money. And I know that we don't know anything about how MSBA makes its decisions, or, it's hard to get information, but I just can't help but wonder that if they're trying to spread the money around the Commonwealth and address need, that maybe they just keep on pushing us off year after year and maybe putting us in a position to go it alone because we had these other two projects. So I don't know. I guess you probably don't have an answer to that, but I just wanted to point that out. That maybe I don't know about these towns who've gone off on their own. I know Watertown. Liza mentioned that they had other projects currently, but are there towns out there who have received multiple bites at this fund in recent years? And are they getting third schools and so on?
Ray probably has more about that. But I believe there are that have gotten more than 2 schools done, but I think those are larger districts that maybe, I believe Brookline is actually one that has gotten 4 bites at that apple, but they've got a lot more schools than Hingham does. So I don't know if there's a thought to, you only have X amount of schools and we're only going to fund X percent of those if you need them. Because you're right, they are trying to spread the funding around.
So the answer, Julie, is really they don't look at that. They don't say, well, Hingham's already gotten 2 schools, so we're not going to. They just don't. You'd like to think that they, right. Well, you could put it both ways. Doesn't the fact that we've had 2 successful projects in the last decade on time and under budget, doesn't that help us, right? You could look at it both ways. And the answer to that is no. So it doesn't help us and it doesn't hurt us. Like Michelle mentioned, Brookline's been chosen a number of times. They just got, in 2018, chosen again. And that's a wealthy town.
Bigger.
Yes. Much bigger. Many more schools, correct.
And severe overcrowding plays into it too, right? So, severe overcrowding, we had severe overcrowding for East School, and the middle school was overcrowding as well, and that helps. That's one of their primaries. If you have severe overcrowding, you're in.
Julie, I think what Ray said earlier about Hingham being 16 out of 15 chosen in 2017 would lend some credence to the fact that it's an objective process, and the fact that we were successful earlier, or maybe we're a more wealthy community than some others, really didn't play a factor.
Vivian, then Nancy, then Libby.
I just have 2 questions. One, how is the MSBA funded, and is there, is it the funding changes from year to year as well, so that also would affect how many schools projects could be chosen? And do we have any idea of what that funding would be for the next round?
So both the core program, the green repair program, the accelerated repair program, they're funded from a penny on the sales tax. And obviously, that has a limit. So I'm looking at a particular provision that addresses this, so if you bear with me. 1% statewide sales tax, known as the School Modernization Trust Fund, SMART Fund, goes to the MSBA's capital program. State sales tax collections inform the amount of annual funding the MSBA can commit for projects. The MSBA's enabling legislation limits increases or decreases annually thereafter by the lesser of 4.5% of the limit for the prior fiscal year, or the percentage increase or decrease of the dedicated sales tax revenue amount over the prior fiscal year. So there definitely is a formula and a limit. It's a little complicated, but there is, they look back into what last year's money was, and
my second question was just, what is the approximate cost of a new school?
okay. So
I realize that.
yeah, well,
Right.
there is an answer, and so Carol Meyer's not in the room, right? Because a long time ago, I got into trouble because we started throwing around a number for what the middle school was going to cost, and years later they held us to that number, but it was what we called a cartoon. It wasn't really based on any design, right? So, but there are metrics that the MSBA has and are available to review, and they're based on a number of factors, including, most importantly, enrollment and the size of the school you're going to build. So, and these metrics are readily available on the website, and you can get this information. Plus, you have to take into account what construction costs are now, and they're forever increasing. So, yeah, based on, I'm a lawyer, that's what we do. Yeah, there's too many lawyers in this room.
So the range is.
Right.
Yeah, so MSBA metrics based on enrollment, we have 489 right now, so call it 500 just for grins, right? MSBA designs to an average enrollment, not a peak enrollment, but just let's call it 500. That's a nice round number. Construction costs right now are at least 400 per square foot, and soft costs will run probably an additional 23% of that number. So that brings you to about 525 to 550 per square foot. If you take into account a school building size of about 90 to 100,000 square feet, just for reference, the current Foster is about 72,000, I think. The East Middle School, I think, is 93,000 and change square feet, around there. So it would be comparable to East because all the schools are about the same enrollment within margin of error. You're really talking about closer to a $50 million school, 47.5 to $50 million based on those numbers. Again, estimates, metrics, all, and we talked about, I think George mentioned the percentage reimbursement. So the East reimbursement was a straight 40%. The middle school was 43.87%, which included 5 percentage points for the model program. You no longer get those additional 5 percentage points for the model program if you are in that program. I doubt that we would be in it based on the constraints of this site. So not an issue in any event. Take a minimum of 31%. The likelihood, based on information I've gotten from talking to a number of designers and OPMs, you could probably be safe to assume 35%. It could be a little higher, not likely to be lower, but it won't be like 81% like Quincy gets or other towns because there is a financial aspect that they look at when they compute the reimbursement cost. So you're probably looking at somewhere between 45 and 50 million in round numbers as an estimate based on the MSBA metrics for a school of the size we're talking about.
Nancy?
I think my question may have been answered with George's, but I do just want to ask it again anyway. So twice now you've mentioned overcrowding as a criteria in the MSBA. We know that was a significant problem. At the middle school, it was a significant problem at East. It's why they were prioritized the way they were. Is the fact that there is not, I don't want to get into a numbers game, but it's not at the critical level that it was when we were doing East, for sure, and the middle school. Even though there's an argument to be made there's overcrowding, would that be something that would prohibit us? Is that a criteria that kind of takes you further down the line with the MSBA than just saying we have an infrastructure problem?
No. So
No?
I would say we have an overcrowding problem right now. I mean, I would say that Foster is smaller than it needs to be. You know, I think it has the second largest of the 4 elementary school enrollments right now, but historically it's been the smaller. But
My question
yeah,
is
I understand.
it, okay.
I don't think, I think overcrowding is one component. It's not a component in every, and if you don't have it, you're dinged for it. It could be infrastructure, it could be, I mean, we have a number of issues with Foster. Overcrowding is not a significant one, but it doesn't hurt us that it's not.
Yeah, it doesn't meet the programmatic needs of an educational institution in today's day and age.
Right.
You know, there's no natural light. There's a bunch of educational issues that are, wrong with Foster, in addition to the infrastructure issues. You know.
Just a quick question on the MSBA application cycle. So I know it was mentioned in here that it'd be this April, and then you get an answer next December. Is that how it works every year? Is that the application cycle, and is it annually?
Yes.
So it's every April you apply?
Every January, there's an alert that goes out.
Okay.
And it says the application process for the new statement of interest period is open. Here's the deadline. The core program is always sometime in the first or second week of April.
Okay.
And the accelerated repair program is usually by mid-February.
And the other thing I just mentioned real quick is we're talking about for the 2020 town meeting, although we haven't gotten through this one yet, but I would just keep in mind that I know for us warrant articles, typically they're already voted on by the first week of March. So you're really talking about, for you guys, a 3-month, which would be, you really only have 3 months. So just keep that in mind.
If it's okay with my colleagues, I'd like to open it up to the floor. Folks have been patient in the audience. We okay? Yeah? Would anyone in the audience like to speak? If you'd give us your name and address, please.
I just wanted to, I'm Monica Matthews, and I teach 4th grade. I've been at Foster School for 14 years, and I just wanted to put just the day-to-day face on it for you all, because I know you're talking a lot about numbers and money, but in my 14 years there, I had a classroom 2 or 3 years ago that had the steam pipes burst, so we had all the sweaty walls and rust pouring down them every day. And there's people in there every day working on that building. There are crews in there literally every day just checking on the heat, fixing the heat. We have rooms that are really, really hot. Then we have rooms that are really cold. We had, classrooms last week that had to move to another space because of the odor of the fumes from the boiler. That it was thinking, it wasn't all that safe. So it's like a day-to-day occurrence, which I'm completely impressed with how they keep that building running, and that the kids come and they decide if they're going to wear their coat during the day or if they're going to leave and take off another layer when they come in the classroom, depending on how what the temperature is for the day. So I feel like John and all the people who are in there every day are doing a great job, but it is truly I walk in that building every day having no idea what the day is going to bring. And that's on top of just teaching. So just keep in mind that this is happening right now. This has been going on now for years. And if we're talking about a building taking 4 years to get going, this building isn't going to last. I mean, I just feel like this building we're doing the best we can with band-aiding it, but it's definitely a day-to-day decision. Like how your day is going to go. It impacts it every single day. So thanks. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Dana Hanseth, Bel Air, 49 Bel Air Road. I'm a foster parent. I worked there for a year, and I'm currently a 3rd grade teacher at East School. So just to kind of piggyback on what Monica said, I give the staff so much credit. Like she's saying, I know that John has said, thank God, that the building isn't going to fall to the ground and be uninhabitable anytime soon. But there are so many little things each day that disrupt the children's learning, the teachers' teaching, and quite frankly, when most people who don't work in the education world step foot in foster school, I've heard it so many times, how do you last a day in there? It is so hot, odors. I'm assuming that most of you, you're saying a lot of you are lawyers, you wouldn't put up with that for one day in your workplace. And it's unacceptable that our children and our teachers have to put up with that. And I think that it is important that people around town do know that it isn't just they want a brand new, lovely, up-to-date school. The building department has done a phenomenal job. But like Monica said, when I taught there were days where there were people passed out because it was so hot. And it's no way to teach. Teaching's already difficult. So I think it's just definitely something that needs to be thought about. So,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Tom, hi.
Yes,
Tom
sir.
Kaline. I'm the president of the PTO at Foster School with Sarah Abbott here. Both of our children, my wife Susanna, both of our kids went to that school. The facility, I mean, the quality of the teachers in that school are amazing. And as a town, to say this is the building we're going to give these amazing teachers is such a slap in the face. To say, you know, like people are, you got kids in shorts during the winter, and you got another side of the building, you got kids wearing their coats during class. So not only as a teacher are you supposed to go in that building and teach these kids, but you're supposed to juggle around and, hey, we can't be here, but we got to be here, but I got to worry about my lesson plan, but we can't be in this room. Our first PTO meeting of the year was cut short in the cafeteria because we had to move kids down there because it was so hot in the school. And granted, I know the schools don't have air conditioning, but it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous as a town that wants to toot its horn on the quality of our education to then say, you know what, we're going to kick the can down the road another time and we're going to apply. I understand it's a lot of money, but it's ridiculous. Go in that school as members of the advisory committee when it rains and see the custodian, Ashley, run around with trash cans. How many?
8.
8 to collect the leaks that happen in that school and say, you know what, this is fair. This is the best we can do for these kids. We're killing it. These kids are just getting the best that Hingham has to offer. Go in there. As a PTO, we have to, there's no auditorium, there's no place in that building to accommodate the school. So if we want to do anything as a PTO, we have to pay twice to accommodate an all-school assembly or to have an author visit that addresses the whole school. It's just not fair. Go to any other school, there's an auditorium that can accommodate a school. We can't have an all-school assembly. We have one at the end of school that's out on the playground, so fingers crossed that the weather's nice, so the whole school can gather together, because they can't do it now. And it's just, well, I can't.
It impacts the sense of community.
I mean, there is no sense of community because the grades are constantly separated. And you don't have that school coming together. So for everybody to say, you know, all these things that happen in the school, somebody's got to take a stand and say, this school needs to be built and that this needs to happen. And you know what? The third time, my kid's not even going to be in the school by the time, because we've gotten to this point. Both of my kids are going to be out of the school. And it's been discussed for 15 years, and here we are. You're wondering if we should postpone and whether or not they're going to select us, and maybe we go a 5th year, and maybe we go a 6th year, and maybe we take a year off, and 7 years from now, we'll be sitting here talking about maybe we're going to apply again. And at some point, it's got to stop, because we're not doing our kids any favor, we're not doing this town any favor, we're not, you know, it's just not fair.
And asking for 4 more months is even a slap in the face. Because we would have all of December as well as January, February, and March before that April meeting. So we really have 4 months.
It's about getting the Warrant Article in.
I believe to see what everyone can do to keep Foster running and what they've already done, the building committee, I'm certain they could probably get that feasibility study. So even saying we'll just wait 4 more months is insulting to our students and our teachers and our families and our taxpayers who are in Hingham expecting that quality education, but because of you chose to live on this street and not another street, your child has completely compromised education. And that is unfair. So when we talk about waiting and asking a 4th time, that's intolerable. And asking for even just 4 more months to wait, well, can't we just vote on it at the April 2020 meeting is truly just unkind. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Donna, could I
just speak to you? You asked a question about timing and the difference between 4 months, and I don't think you got an answer really. And I'd like to just speak to that just a little bit. What I mentioned earlier about the MSBA program evolving since we did the middle school is they added a module at the front called eligibility period, which you've heard, and it's in the warrant article. So that's generally a 6 to 8 month period of time during which you're supposed to, I have it all so I don't forget. You get, it's a 270-day period, so 9 months to get your vote, confirmation of community authorization funding, putting together your educational profile and your maintenance practices, forming a school building committee, doing an initial compliance certification for the MSBA. So that's all part of the eligibility period.
And that's pre or post award?
I'm sorry?
Pre or post being
That's post invitation.
Okay.
So once you receive an invitation, it's to the eligibility period, and that starts the clock. Now, 270-day period to get your vote, but typically it's a 6 to 8 month period. However, that could be extended by the MSBA. In talking to a consultant today who's done a number of projects in the last couple of years, if the MSBA, depending on how many invitations it extends at any given time, if a large number of districts are ready to submit all of their paperwork for eligibility certification and meeting all the requirements at the same time, they could come back and say, you know what, we're going to take these 4 right now, and these other 4 we're going to wait 3 months. There's no telling now that they would do that necessarily, but they certainly could, and they have to other districts. So you could be waiting not just the 4 months for town meeting, but an additional number of months that the MSBA could decide to delay you even after an invitation. So just looking at going alone versus going with the MSBA, in terms of timing, you could end up extending, you're talking about 3-4 years, it doesn't have to be that long. The East School funding was granted in town meeting in 2008. The school opened in September of 2009. It was a 13-month construction. Middle school was 24-month construction. Opened in September of 14. The money was appropriated in October of 2011, went out to bid in March of 2012, broke ground in June of 2012, opened in September of 2014. Substantial completion was May, 2 years. So it doesn't have to take that long. The middle school was twice as long as East School because it was almost twice as large. So it's just a larger construction project. But that added component of the additional eligibility module before feasibility adds at least 6 to 8 months. And I asked the question, well, does the fact that we've already formed a building committee and we've already gotten our vote and secured our feasibility money in advance of the invitation, does that shorten that time period? You would think it would, right? It doesn't. So the MSBA says, work with us on our schedule, and 6 to 8 months actually could end up being a year or more, depending on how many districts are turning in paperwork at one time, how much they can handle, how much they want to deal with, how they decide to parse it out in terms of moving districts on to the feasibility stage. So that's just kind of an anecdotal additional piece of information on timing.
The MSBA has requirements about how specifications on how to build the building, right? They're very standardized now, and they don't have the model school program anymore, but they basically tell you how they'd want the building to be constructed, correct?
That's correct. They do still have the model school program.
Okay.
They just don't give you additional reimbursement points for it.
So is there any way that if Hingham chose to go it alone for whatever reasons, is there any way to build a school the way we want the school to be built, in a correct fashion, but to save any money? Are there requirements the MSBA has that you think would be above and beyond what we could build in Hingham?
So it probably wouldn't save us any money per se, because construction costs are what they are. Soft costs, all of those things that go into a project are what they are, and the MSBA doesn't necessarily add money. What they do is they add hoops and they add time. And it could be a significant amount of time. It's just unknown at this point without an invitation. So you certainly could, obviously you would have more freedom to design something the way you want to design it. If you were smart, you'd probably follow reasonably close guidelines, because the MSB, they build classrooms of a certain size now. They used to be 750 square feet, now they're 900 square feet. They're, certain number of rooms, certain number of, it's all kind of standard. You put together a space summary, and that's one of the things you do during the feasibility period, once you get to there. So I don't know that you would necessarily save time, but you could save money, but you could save time.
I'm just curious about how long it takes to build a school. Let's assume that everything goes our way with this application. See if my math is right. That's not in 9 months we'll hear. And let's assume it's a yes and we get funded. From that point on, you've got feasibility studies, you've got architectural studies, you've got putting things out to bid, you've got construction time. So from today, and I'm responding to the comments that came from our visitors, starting from today, if everything goes our way, when would the kids be walking into a new school? About 3 years from now?
Everything broke the right way.
3.5 years? 4 years?
So December.
That's pretty good.
It probably would be 2022.
September.
3 years from here.
September.
Yeah.
September 20.
I think so. I think so. Based on the additional module of eligibility, which adds 6 to 8 months and possibly more, potentially that's an extra year. If you look at East, that was 13-month construction, and they didn't have the additional hoops then, so it was a faster process. It's possible it could be 2021, but you generally want to open up a school in September. You don't want to do it mid-year.
Let's say September.
Yeah.
So basically 3.5 years. Yeah.
Which,
Yeah, I just had a question. I know that, I think Ray said that we had recently done an enrollment study.
Correct.
Was that this year?
Yes.
Okay. So I know a lot of foster parents definitely are concerned about the shipyard and the enrollment just this year with kids from the shipyard at Foster. I'm actually surprised to hear that Foster isn't overcrowded. It seems like the numbers are a little higher than some of the other elementary schools, and going to be rising would be my prediction because of the new apartments at the shipyard, but I could be wrong.
I think it's a kind of you use the term overcrowded. It's relative, right? When we were overcrowded before, we only had 3 elementary schools, and we had 735 kids at PRS. Okay. Right.
Yeah,
when it's supposed to house 500 or less, right?
So certainly more students, but not
So Foster
and also when you take
supposed to hold how many students?
Yeah, well, it's about what we have, but the problem is the size of the classrooms, the nature of the classrooms, the tandem that you have to walk through one to get to another. There's 12 of those, I think. The natural light, all sorts of things that impact the educational program. Certainly, the rooms are smaller than they would be built now and designed now.
Right.
You're right. We did the enrollment study, and it did take into account the projects that were coming online with Avalon at the shipyard, with Alliance that had just recently been permitted, and is under construction now, although probably those kids would go to PRS, but it was a district-wide enrollment study, so it looked at everything.
Because, and this is just hearsay, I really did hear this number a few times, though, that 55 children have enrolled at Foster schools since those apartments have opened. Is that a rumor?
No. Yeah, that's false.
Yeah, I think that's a high number. I
It
do.
seems like a very high number,
Right.
so I
Yeah,
was
no,
wondering.
it's not 55 students.
Not an accurate number, thank you.
I want to get close to the end of our hearing because we have some more work to do tonight, but I want to make sure we take advantage of the folks that are here. Quick.
I got another question.
Go quick.
Okay.
Quickly.
This is a related question. Given the state of Foster School, do we have any indication that it could perhaps be affecting real estate values around the school? And if so, what have you heard? What have you seen? What are realtors saying?
I mean,
Don't know.
we all live in the neighborhoods. I know people that have told other people, you don't want your kids to go to Foster school. You want them to go to the nicer, newer schools. Now that's someone's feelings and opinion. The community at Foster School is actually one of the closest communities I've been part of here since living in Hingham in 10 years. So even though we might not have the prettiest school that's in the best shape, I feel like it is such an amazing community where people gather after school, before school. It's a neighborhood filled with walkers, but I think that the buzz is out there that it is quote unquote unsafe, and not just for structural reasons. I've brought this up a few other meetings, but we are trained as teachers in Hingham to do specific things if, God forbid, an intruder were to enter our schools. Fosters, we are told to use our best judgment, but basically try to barricade the kids in the room and lock the doors. Well, as Ray just said, there's about 12 tandem classrooms with fake walls, fake doors, with no locks. So how are teachers supposed to do what they've been trained to do if they don't even have the resources to do it? So it is one piece to really think about. That is a huge safety piece. I mean, I doubt many people would feel comfortable working in a bank that didn't have a security guard. It's definitely a fear for parents whose kids are there, who know the structure of the school, and it is scary. So, but to go back to your question, I think it is a really, really good question, and I think that it's a matter of time that maybe before it does affect real estate.
Maybe move on?
Okay.
Questions we need to consider tonight, my colleagues? Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate your time and interest. As I said, we will vote on this likely the last week in February at a date that we will let you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any particular questions? And again, I mean, you heard it, right? I mean, it's not a quick process, and we'll just consider this.
Excellent. Thank you. So we are closing the hearing on Article Z and moving on to the next of our warrant article hearings. Are we ready to keep right on rolling, guys? Okay. So next up, we are going to look at Article AA, which is the Foster School Extraordinary Maintenance Capital. And this is the Evans Show. Would you
just left.
If I only could join them. Yeah. Okay. So I'd like to follow the same procedure. So if you would walk us through the question, we'll see whether our school friends would like to add any additional context. We'll take questions from the group and then any questions from the audience, and then we're going to vote. Okay?
So question, Article AA is a Foster School Extraordinary Maintenance Capital article. Will the town vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds an amount of up to $350,000 to be expended under the direction of the school committee upon the recommendation of the 2017 School Building Committee for the purposes of funding Foster Elementary extraordinary maintenance capital needs during fiscal year 2020 for the existing school building, or act on anything related thereto? And we've spoken extensively about Foster School this evening. you'll find that my comment isn't nearly as long as my colleague George's. But in my comment, I can read it verbatim, or I can give you the...
Just give us the highlight, no need to read it.
Foster School is nearly 70 years old. I think the school administration has come up with a list of things, some of them in George's description, but include things like boiler maintenance or replacement, electrical upgrades and repairs, and potential roof maintenance that they'd like to have ready access to funds for during the time that we are determining what the best option for Foster School is. And these funds will only be expended to prevent any major system failure or loss and to provide preventative maintenance. Funds not expended would be returned to the town.
Would you
and
like
it is just important to know that the Board of Selectmen already voted in favor of this particular article.
And on a unanimous vote?
On a unanimous basis, yes.
Okay. John, do you want to add?
Yes, I'd just like to add one point that in what Evan read, that the attorney will be changing that to not restrict the money to 2020, such that it would be a capital project and it would sit there until such time as a permanent solution is available. So it's not subject to 2020. Okay.
This article is going to be...
It will be sit there in a capital project, and it will...
The article itself is going to be amended?
Yes. The language should be rewritten,
Question,
yes.
yeah.
It will be, yeah, the question will be
But I did not do that because that is not our responsibility.
Yeah.
So the recommended motion, however, we may need to clarify the language in the recommended motion because it now references needs in fiscal 2020. So we'll get that correct language from the attorneys.
Correct.
Okay. As please excuse me, folks who are not in the audience. Please excuse me, folks who are in the audience. It's been that kind of a week. You can't see the recommended motion, and we can. My apologies. Despite Evan's best efforts to be responsive to my advice earlier in the day, my flip-flopping was wrong. It is anticipated that this $350,000, were we to approve it, would come out of fund balance, and therefore the language of the recommended motion.
I changed that if you'd like to read that.
Go ahead.
That the town appropriate an amount of up to $350,000 to be expended under the direction of the school committee upon the recommendation of the 2017 School Building Committee for the purpose of funding Foster Elementary School extraordinary maintenance capital needs. This is the part that will be changed. It right now reads, during fiscal year 2020 for the existing school building or act on anything related
And you can
thereto.
also drop that or act on anything there too. We don't need that phrase.
Dropped.
Okay?
So is borrow going out?
Borrow is going out. That
And
the
so-
town appropriate
So then the
an
comment's
amount.
going to change too.
And the comment,
The 2/3 is going out.
yes, we don't need the 2/3 vote.
That's already changed, Bob. Because Donna gave me a heads up on this just before the meeting. Okay.
So it'll say appropriate from available funds or from fund balance?
I think from, huh?
It's available, isn't it?
It's available, from available funds.
And then I just wanted to ask, I know in the original question, it has an amount up to, and then in the comments, Evan, it's got to appropriate 350, to appropriate the sum of 350, so it doesn't say up to. So is the expectation, John, that it sounds like from the comment that Evan wrote, that the school department would get the whole 350, and then at whatever point there's any left over, if there is any, I think it says that any funds not expended will be returned to the town.
That's correct.
So just to make sure our language is
It is
consistent
up
with
to, but
what-
I mean, this could be for a significant number of years, so I'm not sure that
Okay.
I won't be back at the well in
Okay.
successive years asking for some additional.
Wise to add up to in the comment as well.
Well, up to, see, but up to
Libby,
me.
I guess that's what I'm trying to.
They get the
Yeah.
350 and
Yeah,
return it.
I guess
right?
my
Is that-
my question would be, is that the way the comment's written is that it's saying they're gonna get the 350 and then anything unexpended would be returned to the town. So I'm just saying, is that the intent,
What you're
or should the comment language be up to 350 like the question? So I guess what's the school department's intent? So we make sure that our comment is in sync. Yeah, exactly.
So you want the whole 350. not up to.
Yeah.
That's why
So
we're.
that's.
Because the question as written says up to.
Whole 350 and anything that's left over at the end will be returned.
You're not drawing it each time you need it.
No.
No, I want,
And then you use it.
that's correct, yes, yes, I got you, yes, that's correct.
These are only for capital expenditures.
Yeah, yes,
So
yes.
if you need to replace a square roof, that's gonna come under this, but if you need to buy 12 new buckets for the leak,
Right,
you're gonna take that out of another budget.
yes, yes. And that doesn't mean, Bob, that some money won't be taken, some regular, like maintenance will be coming from the operating budget, okay? I mean, that will be there. This is, I mean, I know 2 projects now, and we spoke of those, that Quick Connect, the 27,000, 28,000 for the, and this is the start, right, to rebuild the circuit breaker. If we need replacements of more breakers, it could go up. But those 2 are the start of what I know. I don't have 350 in my mind right now, but I need that fund available so that it can be used and drawn on when these types of maintenance issues pop up in this building, which they will.
Because our fund balance policy lets us take fund balance for capital needs.
Right.
Yep.
But not for ordinary maintenance.
Yeah, everything here would be
So I-
capital, would be larger projects.
Okay. Dave?
Picking up on Bob's question, I'm curious about the language under the direction of the school committee. So for example,
School building committee.
well, the recommended motion says, school building, well, it says under the direction of the school committee upon the recommendation of the school building committee. So there's 2 layers. So am I to understand then that anytime you pull from this account to pay for something, you're going to raise squad first?
I would like to use the building committee and all their knowledge about buildings and, the group that get put together. I think they can be very useful in being a good sounding board for me if I'm told, hey, we should be doing this and stuff, that I can run it by another group of, people that can help.
and I think
So
it makes
yes, I
perfect
would
sense.
ask. I mean, that's why these aren't going to be just like, hey, okay, I'm using this money for this, I'm using this money for this. It would be more like I would call Ray or Linda and say, hey, can we have a meeting? I got a few issues that I want to discuss with the group.
But
And
at the
I
risk
could
of
run it by that.
At the risk of seeing a problem that may never exist, upon the recommendation. So if the school building committee didn't recommend it, if they disagreed with your assessment that this either qualifies or, then it wouldn't happen.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
I think I would accept their recommendation. I think that we would all come to consensus that this is a good capital project that we should be doing to increase the longevity and the viability of this building over the time that we're operating this building.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
If I could just follow up that, I think John's thinking was not that we would help decide yes or no to something need to be done, but rather kind of help with the mechanics of carrying out what the school administration has proposed, the school committee has authorized, that needs to be done with respect to these types of projects. Just because John's got a lot to do in his day-to-day job, and if you can take some of that off his plate in terms of looking at the details and the nitty-gritty and maybe bringing, helping with RFPs or bringing in a consultant or interviewing someone who's going to do the job or looking at designs or plans or whatever it is, I think that's, since we're waiting and don't have much to do, I think that was the thinking, that we would assist with that mechanics.
I just want to be careful with the recommended language that we didn't either create a process you didn't want
Yeah.
or left you without a process that you need. So I don't have a strong feeling. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what the order of operations is to get this done.
I think the concern was, there was some concern because the school committee is ultimately responsible for and in charge of the expenditure of school money. Once this is appropriated, that will be under their direction, unless otherwise indicated, and that it was desired that our body would help to assist with the mechanics of carrying it out.
Okay.
Evan, so, and I guess to the committee, do we need to then remove, maybe you already did the 2/3, because it wouldn't be subject to 2/3, right? Okay. Okay.
So you just take that sentence out altogether?
I did,
Okay.
I did.
Andy?
It is the limitation on the authority of the school committee to expend the money only upon the recommendation of the school building committee permissible? Does that impinge on the authority of the school committee in a way that the town meeting's not authorized to do?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that's going to be a question for town council.
From what you said, I think it's a great idea, but I just don't know that you can do that.
I think there was some struggle on how to phrase it.
Upon recommendation or with consultation of, I mean, this is a group that I'd like to run. I anticipate wanting to run issues by them because, I mean, I have a good staff. I have people that can give me ideas and things and how we can improve the longevity, but it's nice to have a group of knowledgeable people.
So John, could that just be stricken?
Yeah.
Because you as the business operations director can choose to seek advice where you see fit. And obviously they're a great resource, so.
Right. Well, I wanted to kind of engage them too through the voters. In some sense.
Comment, but
Yeah.
maybe it's not part of the recommended motion. Is that what we're saying?
I was going to say the same thing.
Okay.
Because I think there was some thought too that the school building committee as established right now has limited authority, so this would be extending their authority.
The fact that it's included in this article, right now, we're only empowered really to
Right, regarding the new building.
So moving it to the comment could be a problem.
Well, maybe you can consult with town council as to whether there needs to be some language that extends our
authority,
the scope of our authority or involvement.
Suppose you just said after consultation with.
I think either that
Do you know
or
what it
advice on
Right. The consultation may not allow them to do some work for me too, or
with the
to provide a recommendation,
Right.
with the participation. Yeah.
That's town council's.
Yeah, so.
It's above our pay grade.
Why don't we have, because you're already gonna talk about the 2020, so why don't we have town council weigh in on the best way, understanding what the intent is, which is a noble one.
Yeah.
And we'll adjust. We can leave it in the comment, but adjust the recommendation accordingly.
I have another nervous attorney.
Smelling
This
salts.
is a novice question. So we seem to have an article that's not really written to mean what it is supposed to mean, and yet we're supposed to make a recommendation that is what the article
Is supposed to mean but doesn't say. So I'm just like the up to 350, that's not really it, it's 350. And we don't change the language of the article. So I'm just, as a matter of process, really confused about what we're doing and how we vote on a recommendation that's so different from the article in certain ways.
The rule is that a recommended motion must be within the scope of the original article. So if the original article says up to 350, the recommended motion can't say 600. And it's town council who would, and the moderator who would look to make sure that was in the scope. It's certainly us trying to make sure that it's within the scope. I think the difference, to me, the difference between up to and actually 350 is within the scope. And straightening out the appropriate way to indicate the relationship that we're understanding
and the fiscal
everybody
year, so that's
and
the
the
third.
fiscal.
So there's three different things that are not.
So is
It's
that
just-
I'm not an attorney though, that's the thing.
Well, no, it's.
But red fine to me, but now that you point these things out, yes, you're right, it has to be tweaked to get that
Suppose we
intent correct.
change it to say, and to authorize the school building committee to, now Liza's shaking her head.
No, yeah.
When we had the discussion for the school committee, by statute, the school committee is responsible for the budget. And so as this committee, we're retaining that right of overseeing of the money. However, we know John wants the expertise of the school building committee because of the makeup of the members. They have expertise in construction and all of that. And so that's why it's written the way that it's written. Now, if we need town council to clarify the involvement of the school building committee in the in the decision-making of the projects, that's fine. However, the school committee is maintaining its responsibility of managing the money related to maintaining the schools.
Okay, that's clear.
Just a kind of quick question, what David Lee was talking about. So, John, you said that you were, I think, talking to town council about the fact that it in the question, it specifically talks about fiscal year 20, right?
Correct.
Is that also, I guess, just looking at what latitude there is within, because I know certainly we can't change the question, but I wonder to what extent even town council can, because as Dave Lane said, the up to 350, and then how it's worded, maybe it doesn't say upon the recommendation, but in consultation with. So are those three things that town council could potentially adjust, or is it not able to be because it's already got submitted this way?
I don't know the answer to that question.
When I submitted,
Okay.
when we submitted for the school department, we said, town council needs to look at those, and I did the best to
Yeah.
write a paragraph
Yeah.
of what the intent of it
Yeah.
was, okay? So I'm hearing from this committee that the intent didn't get correctly captured. I mean, in
Yeah.
my mind, it's like, well, oh yeah, this says exactly what I want, okay? But it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
Make sure maybe you could address all three, because we just want to make sure
Yes.
that ultimately our comment and our recommendation, that we are all on the same page, that we recommend what you guys are looking for.
Yeah.
Because we can't
Yeah.
change the article.
No, understood. I mean,
Right.
you know, it was a layman's comment in there, this is what I'm trying to do
And
here,
I'd like
so.
to be clear that I'm sure town council has reviewed the article already.
They have, well,
But-
this was town council's
But,
language.
but we will get, we'll
Yeah.
get clarification on how to appropriately.
Okay.
So you have to tell them we didn't like his language.
Well, no.
We just need the recommended motion to say the correct
There's
thing.
a little communication
Michelle
between you
sent
guys
it to
want.
me. I read that. To me, they sounded good, except for, hey, this isn't restricted to 2020, because my
Yep.
view is, I need to be able to get this 350
Yep.
as we go along,
Yep.
okay? You know, I want to make sure that it's there, I don't want to have to go to any special groups or stuff like that to free it up.
Right.
I want it to be there, and then, and I wanted it to be there until we have an ultimate solution for this building.
Okay.
Yeah, which is why in the comment I said, until a permanent solution is decided for Foster.
Right.
And I was just echoing the article question, but we can change the recommended motion to reflect what's in the body of the comment, correct?
We can change the
We can change the recommended motion, the recommended,
Yeah.
the recommendation to reflect what we've called
Yes.
out in the comment,
yes,
Okay.
yes.
which we will do.
Any additional questions? Are we ready to vote this one?
Shouldn't we defer until we know what the recommendation's going to read?
Well,
I'm uncomfortable if we don't know how the recommendation exactly.
so
Okay.
the recommendation I would change.
I think we probably all support the article.
It does, the intent of the article does
It's
not
just,
change.
It
right?
seems like there's going to be a bunch of language changes, is what I'm hearing.
But I want to understand, if folks would rather have the language changes first, then we can defer this vote.
I'm fine with not changing the language, just voting tonight.
Yeah. We know what it's going to say. So what I will say is.
Can you read what
Sure.
you're recommending?
I would say that upon the recommendation of the 2017 Building Committee for the purposes of funding Foster Elementary School maintenance and capital needs, until such time as a permanent solution is decided for Foster Elementary School.
That's in the comment.
No. we're
Can
talking
you
about
do the recommended
Recommended
motion?
motion.
What's your recommended motion?
Okay.
Read the second half.
I did. So the
I'm
current.
sorry,
From
I
the
just-
beginning.
Okay. The recommended motion, I'll read the entire thing, currently says that the town vote to appropriate an amount of up to $350,000 to be expended under the direction of the School Building Committee upon the recommendation of the 2017 School Building Committee for the purposes of funding Foster Elementary School extraordinary maintenance capital needs. Currently says during fiscal year 2020. What I would change was until such time, basically the language from the comment above. Until such time as a permanent solution is decided for Foster Elementary School.
When you were
Still have to
reading.
have transfer from available funds in there, too.
Yeah.
We have
No, we don't, because this
appropriate
isn't appropriated, this is this got
You need to
changed.
have you do need to have from available funds, so
Yeah.
From-
appropriate
Transfer
from,
because we're going to transfer it from
So vote to
fund
appropriate
balance, right?
from available
I know, but, so you need to.
I think it's
under the
appropriate
direction
from
of the school
available
committee.
funds, Bob.
Okay.
You said when you were reading it, you read school
Okay.
building committee. Under
It's
the
transfer?
recommendation of the 27, there's only one school.
It doesn't hurt to have.
You know
the
what I
ex-
just heard? Donna's wrong. I heard Donna's right the other day. I heard Donna's wrong.
Doesn't hurt to have the extra word.
Read it aloud.
All right, so I just.
Yeah, so just when you read it aloud, you said school building committee right here. when
You are-
meant to say
Because we don't
school
know
committee.
what upon the recommendation of the school building committee means.
Okay, then I'm going to defer the vote on this until we get clarification. And I would hope that we're deferring this until next week. I would hope we could get clarification sooner, that we...
Donna, can I just throw in one question if it's going to be
Yep.
reworked a little bit? Given John's thought that perhaps this would be fully expended and there would be an additional request down the road, can we just keep that in mind in terms of the recommended motion and not, somehow box ourselves? In other words, Evan's language sounds good to me, like until such time as the Foster situation is resolved. But it's conceivable the Foster situation is unresolved, this money has all been spent, and we're back talking about this again. I just wouldn't want to, trip up the next ask in the recommended motion of this one.
Okay.
Not that that does it,
Shouldn't that be in the
someone should
comment
ask.
though, Dave, do you think?
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think we're not gonna pre-appropriate. I'm just saying, don't do anything in the recommended to preclude it.
Right.
But we don't say,
Gotcha.
And you
follow
don't.
your train of thought, we don't say anywhere that we're not coming back to the well.
And I'm not saying you do, I'm just saying, while you're opening up the hood, just make sure that that's kosher.
I thought we started by talking that this would be a year, because if the 350 was not expended, the balance would be returned.
I think the balance would be returned after a period of years, is what I'm now
Correct.
understanding.
When the new school arrives.
So who's going to talk to town council?
2023.
I'll follow up. I'll follow
So
up.
I think you should probably ask them if they have to open the warrant and substitute a new warrant article.
You don't think these changes are within the scope of the original one?
I think the limitation to a particular fiscal year is a significant change.
This was, I mean, I did, when I saw it, I got this draft from Michelle, and I said, no, not the 2020. I got a confirmation that John Coughlin will change the language, so.
If John says we can change it to
Yes.
here in the recommendation,
Yeah.
that's fine. But I think somebody has to ask him, is that okay?
Oh, yeah, I
Okay,
believe that, well, I asked that the other night at the Board of Selectmen meetings. I believe this is 2020, and I looked over and she said yes. And so I had presumed that John had agreed to that, or I may have even got an email of that.
We'll
Sure.
just make sure we're
Yeah,
clear here,
yeah.
because
We'll
we,
get that cleared.
aren't you glad to hear we want to make it
No,
sure that you're going to be able to spend this money?
No, I think
That's
this is-
good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. I misread it. There is no fiscal year limitation in the warrant question.
Yes, there is.
Is there?
It says it right there. If that's what you read, unless you have the newer one.
Do you have a newer one?
He might have the newer one.
I've got,
Maybe you got
the one I have in my book
The one that.
doesn't have a fiscal year
Okay, so he
limitation.
must have removed it. He must have moved it, Bob. You have the one that he's already working
But
on. I'm sorry, I didn't get it. I gotta get that.
So, yeah, the one I got in the email this afternoon has a fiscal year limitation,
I haven't got that.
but the one in my warrant book has no fiscal year limitation.
We will figure out which one is most current. We will figure out whether we have a problem with the comment, with the article, and we will get clarification on the correct way to phrase the recommended motion. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Moving on. Let's take a look at Article BB, which is funding for the high school.
Oh, I can't wait to see what you all do to this one. Volunteering at its finest. So this article is funding for the high school Clerestory window project, Article BB. I will read you the question verbatim. Will the town vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds an amount of up to, another one, $550,160, very precise, John, for the purpose of replacing the Clerestory windows and completing other work related to this project at Hingham High School, or act on anything related thereto.
The overview of the issue is?
The overview of the issue is, last year, there was a warrant Article 15 where the town voted to move forward with a $60,000 project to assess and design the Clerestory windows at the high school. There's a 50-year-old wall and a 20-year-old wall. Both were found to have some structural cracks in them. We were originally given an estimate range between $600,000 and $1 million to replace the walls, depending upon the scope of any structural damage. Through the diligence of our school administration colleagues, they moved forward with that assessment, were found that there was no additional structural damage to the roof, which would have been the extenuating circumstance which would have driven up the cost, and subsequently requested 4 bids from 4 reputable firms to replace the walls. Of the 4 bids, they selected the lowest bid, which came in significantly under the low end of the range. And John shared with me that he also clarified with the engineering firm that he was working with that this was a reputable organization, and therefore the article requests funding of up to $550,160 to commence replacement of the Clerestory windows, the work to be completed in the summer of 2019. This article requires 2/3 vote at town meeting, and I'll have you note that the Board of Selectmen voted unanimously for this article on Tuesday evening.
We would adjust the comment to put in the requirement for the 2/3 vote, and there is also...
I'm sorry, I've done that on my copy because you shared that with me before. What I sent before did not have that.
And we have prescribed language that we would add to the recommended motion whenever we are going to be borrowing.
So this will be borrowing.
So this would be borrowing. So, Dave.
John, did the full 60 get spent from last year's?
No, actually, I think we get, I think I was somewhere between 49 and 55. I have to see the final bill.
Or does that go back? I don't know.
Well, whatever's left over will go back to the town. If there's...
So it won't necessarily offset this ask, or it won't stay in this project, it'll come back to the town? Do you know what?
Right, I mean, and even this 550, that includes the bid and the contingency, so I would think that when we complete it, whatever isn't get completed will get closed out and get returned to the town.
Great, okay.
You could do that, though, Dave, we did it for the Fields project.
Keep the 60 and just put it in?
What was left over from one aspect was rolled over to another phase of the project.
That's what I was wondering, that's why I asked. I mean,
You have to.
I was just curious.
But it can.
I don't know if it's worth the work for 6,000 or 5,000.
I don't know, that's why I was asking.
I'm not sure what the dollar figure is. And actually, there's
Plus you have a good number.
yeah, and there's another element. So they're gonna the designer for that 60 is gonna do the project management for it too.
Oh.
So I think the bid came in 49 plus expenses, and we had project dogs. So I'm not sure we're under the 60.
That's great.
And we will remain under the 60, but there's not gonna be a lot of. Yeah. I mean, there may be a few $1,000s, under 10 for sure.
No worries, thanks.
It's been a long time since I saw a project come in under. Congratulations.
School does it all the time. Ray does it.
Well, I mean, we were fortunate because the project was actually, I mean, we had that range of the 600 to $1 million because we weren't sure if there was roof damage, and if there was roof damage, we would have to do the air handlers adjacent too.
It was going to be a more complicated project.
So that's why the range was so wide. So we decided to do the study first, so we could evaluate the roof, and, the roof was fine, so there's no need to do the ear handles, even though they're getting old, but we're not going to touch that in this project.
Yep, okay.
Evan, just a couple of quick, the 60,000, is that, did you take off the extra zero? I'm just checking. Oh, no, I'm just, okay.
It wasn't automatically 600,000 now.
Just checking. And then third paragraph of the comment, you talked about that proposals were received from 4 firms to provide a firm fixed bid.
Yes.
Do we want to say from 4 vendors? So that we're not saying firm in 2 different contexts? Does it seem like that would be clear?
Or contractors would be fine too.
Contractors.
Yeah,
Or contractors.
And then at the end there, where it's confirmed at the below end, will we say
Yeah, I
lower
already
end?
changed that.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the or act on anything, did you take that out of the recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's it.
English teacher.
I know, not bad for a dumb accountant over here.
Andy?
This is a obvious.
You don't get.
Obvious newbie question. And I only ask you because the previous article said the amount up to $350,000 to be expended under the direction of the school committee. Is that language necessary in this article?
I think that was in the previous article because of the reference to the additional group. I don't think
Okay.
I think it's assumed otherwise.
All school are.
Victor?
I'm just curious on the, I was going to have a question on the roof, so I'm glad to hear that wasn't involved. But, I mean, just as someone who knows nothing about construction, this does seem a lot of money for windows. I mean, why does anybody build these types of windows or install these types of windows?
Well, you know which windows they are. So you saw the netting that's in front of those windows. I mean, all gyms seem to have them. It's to provide some illumination into the gym, I guess, from the outside, and and maybe block some of the light as well. It's nice. It gives a little different ambiance. Otherwise, you're just prone to like fluorescent lights, I guess, because it's just dark in there. I don't know.
anymore, Victor.
Right.
No, they don't go anymore.
Clerestory just said windows.
The different kind of lighting.
Right.
Okay, so I guess what Ray's saying that I guess modern lighting, you're able to not use those here.
I guess I haven't built a high school. I mean, you don't see them in all auditoriums, but I mean, when we were going out to the designers, of course they're showing me many Clerestory window projects in gyms. So a lot of them have them.
Is there anybody here that might be new on the advisory committee that doesn't know what we're talking about and would like to see some pictures? Or not? You've seen them all?
Yeah, it's the best part.
Okay. Last year. I was at town meeting last year. I was not advisory, but I paid attention.
Appreciate that. Additional questions from my colleagues?
So Donna, where this one changed, would you like me to read the recommended motion? I just have a question. So where this is a potential borrow,
So
so then it reads.
I have language from,
Okay.
you will need to, this is the language from last year for the fire truck. So you would just need to insert your sentences.
Yes, pay back, Evan, because I did that one last year.
It's awfully long, Libby.
The language in the
It's-
book seems to take care of
A lot of
it.
money.
Municipal Modernization Act, isn't there something? No language, okay.
So wait,
It's language that's necessary for things that are
recommended to
going to be
town
borrowed.
and not in excess of purposes.
It's in the, he has to put it into the recommended
Yeah.
motion because it's borrowing.
Of course, I can't copy and paste this. Okay.
You good?
Want me to read it to you?
Ladies and gentlemen, may I remind you that you're on camera?
Yes.
It's very
Yes,
detailed.
Andy.
Yeah.
It's a long read.
So can I read the recommended motion the way it was and then change for the borrow? Or do we have to have, okay, so we can vote?
Well, I would like to acknowledge, I'm fine to read the recommended language as it's here, but I think we should also read this language as well.
Well, so that all of my colleagues who are attorneys will understand that we're covering it.
So anything below the any premium received?
Yeah.
Is that, okay, so that just needs to be
both,
inserted.
both paragraphs. Everything that's in boldface.
Okay,
Why don't you read your part and I'll read that? Do you want me to?
sure.
The recommended motion Wait a second, just a second.
You want me to read my part?
Go ahead.
That the town raise and appropriate, borrow, transfer from available funds an amount of up to $160,000 for the purpose of replacing the Clerestory windows and completing the work related to this project at Hingham High School.
I think it needs to read that the town appropriate an amount, not in, of up to, rather than the phrase. And then we're good. And then the recommended motion will go on to say, to meet said appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said sum under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7, or any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. Any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount. Don't ask me a question about that.
No, it's an easy question.
Yes, ma'am.
You wouldn't happen to have on there what article number that was last year? For those of us that need to cut
Article
and paste.
13.
Thank you.
Second.
Are we prepared to vote? Are we comfortable? Okay.
What you read is a boilerplate.
Oh, what I read is a boilerplate that must be attached to any article that involves borrowing.
So we're going to hear that one again. Yeah.
Okay. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? And that's 1, 2,
13, no.
Okay.
Nobody abstained, right?
Sorry, it's been a long week, we've had meetings every night.
Eric's the only one
Okay.
missing.
Okay. Next up, we're going to consider authorizing 5-year leases for school transportation vehicles.
Don, you need that? Is that your?
You can have that.
We'll get it framed for you.
George, would you lead us through this one?
Okay, colleagues, this is Article CC. And the wording of the article is, will the town authorize the school department to enter into leases of up to 5 years for the purpose of leasing school buses and special education vans used for regular and special education transportation, or act on anything related thereto? So this is a fairly simple request. Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30B, Section 12, restricts the town from entering into a lease agreement of more than 3 years without the approval of town meeting. So this article asks us to go before the town and get approval to lease these vehicles for up to 5 years. School department currently has a number of big yellow buses on 5-year lease plans. They're very satisfied with them. The vehicles perform very well, there are no major issues, and so they would like to continue that practice by leasing additional vehicles for 5 years. Question?
Yeah, I mean, we have in plan one bus. We're going to take on another Met bus so we can do the Met Go run. We've already taken on the elementary, but last year, but we did a 3-year lease on this. But you know, we're 4 years of we're in the 4th year of our previous 5-year lease. So, you know, we'd be back probably next year asking for another 5-year lease because we'd have to go out to bid again. But this is to get the one bus because I can really lower the cost significantly, the operating cost. And the buses are great for 5 years. 5 years is not a problem with these. And
So I was unclear whether this was asking for permission in perpetuity to always do 5-year leases, or whether this was for in the current year or a specific vehicle. It wasn't clear.
yeah, it's not. I don't know that we can do in perpetuity. So my intention was that when I have intentions of entering into 5-year lease, or if I'd like that, I would plan for that, and I would ask the town to authorize that for
A particular lease.
The upcoming year, yeah.
For an upcoming year, okay.
Right.
Can we clarify that in a comment?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Other Do you want to add anything more,
No, and I
John?
would just say the same thing. So my budget proposal has the introduction of trying to lease smaller minivans for special education. So this would allow me also to take those leases for 5 years instead of 3 and lower the operating costs so we can have, more savings. I don't think, there's not a big difference in the maintenance aspects or the return aspects of, the maintenance aspects of holding a vehicle for 5 years. But the operating cost would be lower, I would.
Okay. None of us can get inside the heads of the legislature when they pass an ordinance or pass a piece of legislation like this, but I'm curious as to why it requires town meeting approval to go past 3 years. Do we have any idea?
It's
just on the
in
books.
Chapter 30, so yeah, they don't want us without approval.
Without
I mean, I could go more. I mean, we could ask the town for 10 years, but,
Mm-hmm.
but really for, an individual agency, it's limited to 3 years without a majority vote approval.
Okay. Questions from our colleagues?
I had the same question you did. I mean, I read this as perpetual. Particularly, I was surprised that the article, the question was not bounded. And I know John had been through this one time before, so it actually struck me, I didn't take the time to do it, but if we look back at the previous authorization, if that was bounded, I'm assuming it was, and that's why you're here?
Well, the language I pulled when I initially gave it to John was that language. It was from
But is this the language of the last article that you got?
Yeah, from 2015, I asked for this approval, and I thought I just took it out and replaced a couple of words. It was not bounded.
Do you have any idea what the article number was in 15? I haven't won.
No, wait a second.
You might. I can pull up
This
the
is
warrant.
17. No, this is 17.
35.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
You just look up Lease. Dave, it's 35. I just pulled up the 25.
Got it?
This is your article that you did? So
pretty
in the 2015 town meeting, it said, will the town authorize the school department to enter into a lease of up to 5 years for the purpose of leasing new school buses used for regular transportation or act on anything relating thereto?
And what was the recommended motion?
The recommended motion was short and sweet. It was that the town authorize the school department to enter into a lease of up to 5 years for the purpose of leasing new school buses used for regular transportation,
still
kind
in
of
effect?
unbound.
It does say a lease. It says a lease.
Enter a lease for buses.
See, that's why you get a JD, and that's the distinction, literally, a lease.
I have a suggestion as to why.
Wow.
I think it's because you can't bind a future town meeting, and because it's part of the school budget. Once it's approved, then ultimately that would bind a future town meeting in perpetuity, and you can't do that by statute.
Okay.
And my only question that would be, John, just to make sure for your benefit, will it be one lease then for all of the vehicles, or will each vehicle have a lease?
Well, this
This
says
one
leases,
says
right?
leases.
This says leases. So they would.
The recommended motion
No,
says
it says a lease.
Okay, so then I think it would have to say leases,
Oh, well, here we go.
because they won't be through the same organizations.
Well, then, I think Victor may be right about the 2015, but this one seems like it's got a problem.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Well, you could say for
if
fiscal
it said
year.
during fiscal
Yeah, I mean,
20,
as long as there's a boundary.
that's fine too,
Yeah, yeah.
So John, is the lease cost on a per year basis less, the 5-year lease than 3?
Yes, yes. Significantly, I took a 3-year lease for the bus, because we started doing the Metco Elementary run, and we took a 3-year lease on a new bus, and that's running me, I think around $1,400, $14,000 a year. But my 22 buses, they're running me at $10,700. So, a couple $1,000, and it's not gonna be that much money in maintenance at the end, and that's yearly, so, that could be a decent savings. So I think 5 years would be good, and the equipment should be fine for that period of time, and we'll replace tires and brakes, do oil changes, and give it back to them and get new ones.
Actually, that might have answered my question. So these are operating leases, they're just rentals. It's not like a lease to own, so you return them afterwards?
Right. Because they're 5 years, like the bus would be, it's sort of like a purchase lease, and we have to do the financing to it. The intention, and there's always you can purchase it at the end for X number of dollars, like $35,000.
So is there like a dollar buyout option at the end?
No. You could purchase at the end, Libby.
At the
These
market
are
value.
Yeah, some stated value,
Okay.
yes.
So it's really an operating lease. it's a rental, you rent it for the 5 years, you return it, and you get, it's kind of like a copier. Then you rent new.
Yes, that's
new
the,
buses.
that's certainly the intention.
Okay.
Unless we decide we have some good buses and we
Okay.
opt to purchase.
Okay,
for
I
it.
just wanted to distinguish between that, because I know for the country club, they were looking at some equipment and the Liaison and Capital, and we looked at the financing, and the rate they were getting was significantly higher than if they had just financed it through the town. So
Okay.
we ended up recommending that to them because it was a lot cheaper, so, but in that case, that was really like a capital lease, like it was a lease to own.
Right, okay.
So that's different. I just want to make sure I understood. In the question, I know we can't change the language, but I don't know if it's just a typo. It says the purpose or versus purpose of in the question, second line. I mean, I don't know if it just the version we have has the typo, but I would just ask if that's something.
It is my understanding that we don't change comments. and
Yeah, I
we
just didn't
can't
know
even
if-
correct it,
Yeah.
but I can point it out to the.
Because it might, somebody might
Yep.
not understand it
Yep.
at town meeting.
Yep.
And then, I know on Capital, there's, and I don't know if Eric Valentine, the chair of Capital, reached out to you, but I know typically you guys have a van that comes through Capital each year. Is that different than these?
Yes, that's the replacement van for the, it's a 7D van. These are minivans.
Okay.
These are much smaller
Okay.
vehicles, meant for one person, better
All right.
fuel economy, and, to take over some higher cost runs at a lower cost.
Okay, and I just didn't know, I guess, final point would just be that again, the language where we're specifying that they're special education vans, and that the buses are transporting, does it say regular?
Yeah, regular
Or special?
education.
I just think that in the comment, I forgot it was you doing it, you're right here. In the comment and maybe in the recommended motion, we should just specify that it's, that's the vans are for special education vans, and then the transporting students for regular, just to be consistent with the question.
Presentation, John made clear that he wants to use these vans for other purposes when they have downtime,
Okay.
right?
True.
So I guess just
They're
make
just
sure
vans,
that
they're
whatever
not
their
special
intent is,
education
that we-
vans.
Well, they're going to be used primarily for special education transportation, but we use, we would, that doesn't mean we wouldn't use one of our big yellow buses for
It also
special
doesn't-
education either, I mean.
And we're not talking about the vans needing to be equipped with special equipment, are we? Or are we not?
No, I mean,
No.
it's the
It just,
seatbelts and stuff.
yep, okay, all right.
That's it. On mine.
Are there additional questions from my colleagues? I think the one adjustment we're suggesting for the recommended motion is to bound it to the fiscal year. Is that what we have agreed?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
That we're bounding it to the fiscal year? Is that what we agreed?
Yes.
Okay.
Why don't we bound it by,
And it's gonna say leases.
why don't we bound it by the end of the fiscal year? I mean, if John wants to,
Enter during the fiscal year.
well, if John wants to do a lease in May, after the vote of the town meeting,
Oh, yeah.
he shouldn't have to wait till July.
Yeah, good point.
Would one of
I
the
like that,
lawyers
Bob. That would be
please
good,
tell
because then I would be
George
able to
what
go
language
forward.
he should use?
Through the end of fiscal year 20.
All right, so,
End of fiscal year 20.
so the language I have then is the recommended motion that the town authorize the school department in fiscal year 2020
Through fiscal. Through the end.
through fiscal year 2020.
The end of.
It's so they could enter in the lease before.
End of fiscal year 2020.
Well, it's fiscal year 2020 by definition has an end. I'm not one of the many lawyers here, but, all
They like to complicate things.
right. So Victor, that the town authorize the school department through fiscal year, through 2020?
Would you like through the end?
Through the end? To enter into leases of up to 5 years for the purpose of leasing new school buses and vans for transporting students.
One thing, we say new here, but it doesn't say that. Does it matter? Should we take that out? It's just leasing school buses. That's
I think we're good.
it's just deleting one word.
So now is that authorization for more than 2 leases, one for special ed and one for the bus, or is that
No, just-
being able to lease
It's
it?
not restricting.
Whatever leases you want, under 5-year terms.
All right,
Okay.
do it the whole year.
You take it out too, right?
You got more.
I take out new?
Well, no, because I'll lease them in May. Because,
All right.
We don't know.
if I get the plan, we'll enter that process like in May or June, right? That's okay.
News out.
Yeah.
If we
News
were to
out.
do that for next year, right?
Second.
Aye.
Are we ready to vote?
Yeah, we just
All
got a
those
second.
in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? 13-0.
13.
Okay. Thank you to our school colleagues. We appreciate your help tonight. Continued success. We'll let you know when we're going to vote that.
In the next to last line, the comment.
Prevent, prohibit?
Yeah, prevent sort of suggests active.
Okay. Okay.
Did you in fact vote new?
New is gone.
I knew it was gone, just making sure.
It is recorded
Let-
on camera.
Wasn't sure, there was some horse trading over there, I wasn't sure.
When we get to housekeeping, I'll explain part of what's going on here. We're now to liaison updates. Do we need one on the country club? Brief?
I can't talk about the Salute Military Golf Association?
No, you may not. Does it apply to town meeting?
The major thing that applies to town meeting is it does not appear they're going to go forward on Article JJ, which was the lease of the cell tower, because it has been determined that it makes more sense for the country club to do the permitting necessary to have a cell tower site ready to go, and to do the permitting through the town rather than having prospective cell tower providers have to do their own permitting. And it's expected and anticipated that this will ultimately redound to a higher price to the South Shore Country Club in terms of cell tower lease. And
Okay.
I guess I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Do we have an update from the water company subcommittee?
Yeah, not too much to say. We the subcommittee had a meeting last night, which we discussed with the sponsors the number of issues, and tonight the selectmen just a short while ago voted to recommend going ahead with the all 4 of the warrant articles.
Okay. Thank you. We're now to the end of the our meeting, where we talk about some housekeeping items. I'd like to thank. Yeah, really. I'd like to thank Nancy and Daveline, who have offered to help out with necessary editing of the articles. And so I've asked them to listen carefully to our sometimes complicated conversations as we get to recommended motions, and to try to hear exactly which language we decided on, so that we'll be able to reflect it when we go forward. Thank you for that additional help. Our next meeting is scheduled for next Tuesday, at which we will be hearing but not voting on the CPC article, and hearing about 5 other articles. I'll be doing the agenda for that meeting tomorrow. Does anyone need a liaison report on that agenda?
We may be voting capital on Monday night, so.
I'll put capital on just in case.
Yeah. Donna, do you know, the selectmen heard tonight the 3 warrant articles relating to the dredging and the harbor revenues, which are mine. I confirmed with Bob, who was taping it, that I think it'll be available on YouTube tomorrow. So do you know if, I'm just trying to keep ahead of, are those 3 articles, which are the three harbor ones, are those going to be on our agenda for Tuesday night?
Thursday night.
Thursday, okay, great.
Thursday next week.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Subcommittee on the water company's meeting Monday night, so you
Yep.
might want to put a liaison report in for that.
You can put it down, probably just be that we
met. Okay. Very good. Any matters? Oops, Julie?
I have something about the warrant article style guidelines.
Yes.
We've had some articles where we are talking about 2/3 vote at town meeting. And in the style guidelines, it says that you're typing out the word 2/3 and you're not including the fraction.
That's correct.
So I just wanted to point out that in the stat, so for example, Daveline, your Article O, I think it was yours with the 4/5, that you would take out the fraction 4/5 and you just write the words 4/5.
No fractions.
I just edited mine.
Yeah, so.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Very good.
John, one thing I just wanted to put up for the minutes is that, I know I asked Victor about our water subcommittee meeting, if that was going to be televised, because all the WASC hearings and the selectmen hearings were, but I don't think it was, right?
No, it was not.
So I guess I'm not sure I understand why, because it seems like all the meetings related to that have been available to people so that they can.
I didn't put in any request to have it televised, and didn't have a discussion about it.
Okay. We have no matters that came up within 48 hours. Motion to adjourn is in order.
Second.
Thank you all for your hard work this evening. I appreciate it.